Okay, so let's wrap up on the series of videos that we've been doing. When it comes to ethics, one of the things that is the hardest to reconcile, the main challenges when it comes to it, the first thing that we need to think about is what we mentioned in our first class, and we called it ethical relativism. And this, in theory, we say there are two dichotomous thoughts: ethical relativism and ethical absolutism. And we said that ethical relativism is where ethics does not apply. It is not, there is no universally accepted form of ethics. It's all based on the values that a society holds. So ethical absolutism as an idea remains to be an illusion, as it were. That's the first challenge when it comes to ethics. The second reason is what you call psychological egoism. And psychological egoism basically refers to people who always hold their self-interest first above all other things. We are hedonistic by nature, again, maximize pleasure, minimize pain. Therefore, our psychological egos are going to stand in the way of ethics or guidelines that have been set by society to be complied to. That's the second thing. The third thing is the idea of free will. While not going to the philosophy of it currently, there's always this idea that free will as a concept is not existential. It is not possible for a person to have free will. We are always influenced in one way or another by society, by peers, and by the information that we are consuming. But don't forget that any given decision has three things. The first thing is we must ask ourselves, what is the purpose? What is the purpose of the action? That's the first thing. The second thing we must have is free will must exist. In other words, it's not somebody who's holding a gun to your head telling you to do a certain thing and so forth and so forth. Then we need also to understand the circumstances in place. But when we look at these three aspects over here, then we complicate them with our own egos over here and the probability that ethics will never be absolute. And then we say our free will, which we think we have over here, has already been diluted by other people influencing us. Then we can see why ethics as a universal form of behavior is very, very elusive. But that is not to mean it is not achievable. It is very, very important for everyone to have ethics or to be taught ethics, because there are two prongs to it. The first one is there is that intrinsic value to ethics. There is that intrinsic value to ethics. If I do not steal, I'll have peace of mind. I'll not be thinking people are looking out to catch me or arrest me or take me to prison. And then there is the extrinsic value. Extrinsic value, where because I am not stealing, the taxpayer is going to the roles or purposes for which it was meant for. The society is benefiting from my own ethical standards or ethical moral code. Now, that notwithstanding, the following are the dimensions of ethics. You have two main dimensions. The first dimension is what you call the meta ethics, and this is basically a field of ethics that deals with the philosophy of ethics. Then you have the second one, normative ethics, which provides the guideline for behavior. the guideline for behavior, and each have theories that underpin whatever they're talking about. Philosophy on one end, you have the issue of ethical relativism and absolutism. Is it possible to have absolute ethics and so forth? Then we have issue of normative ethics and the theories under it. So we'll discuss the meta-ethics in class, but today we'll just talk about the normative ethic theories. So what are the theories that are under the normative section? The first one is you call teleological or teleology, or what you call consequentialism. And under it we have two. You have ethical egoism and divine command theory. Then you have another one here, which is deontology. It's another theory under this. Then you have utilitarianism theory. So let us see what we mean by this. Teleology is basically where we're talking about the ends justifies the means. Over here, utilitarianism is where the means justifies the end. Now let's see what we mean by ends justifies the means. The consequences that are likely to come from our behavior inform us on which is the best way to arrive at the best outcome. Let me look for a simpler example. This is getting a bit complicated. Teleology is basically about the consequences of behavior. And if we look at the one underpinning under it, for example, ethical egoism over here, we say every person will do what is in their best self-interest, driven by their ego. Now, these two over here, are supposed to be under deontology. That's an error I've made. They're supposed to be under deontology. And under ethical egoism theory, we are basically talking about self-interest. It's how do I stand to gain from a certain form of behavior? Now, divine command theory is all the rule-based behaviors that are guided by religion, because in deontology we say this is rule-based ethics. That's why divine command theory is under it. Rule-based ethics. For example, the 10 commandments are a set of rules meant to guide behavior. That is a rule-based ethic. Then you have a code of ethics for staff members, is a rule-based guideline of behavior. That is deontology. It is basically a set of rules that governs behavior of a certain group of people. Ethical egoism theory, on one hand, has to do with basically what is in it for me. The interests that I have as a human being, that is what basically I will pursue. Now, the interest of one person may differ from another, and so forth, and that is why ethical egoism as an idea becomes very, very elusive. But in a way, it guides the person who's making the decision to behave in a certain way. Now, utilitarianism on the other end is the decision that is to be taken to give the greatest good to the greatest number. An example of utilitarianism in play is the COVID pandemic that we've had, and we are talking about a vaccine. Which is the vaccine that will promise that out of 10 people who are vaccinated, 7 are safe? In other words, they will not get critical health complications, and one that can be able to flatten the curve for me. I am not thinking about perfectionism in that case. I'm thinking about the greatest good for the greatest number of people. That is utilitarianism. So if you were to summarize all these theories, several things come into play. Teleology is where the moral worth of an action is determined by the consequences of that action. The end is what is justifying the means. Ethical egoism theory is where the self-interest of the person is guiding their decision. Divine command theory is a rule-based deontological theory where you are ascribing all the rules of behavior from your religion. I am a Christian, the Ten Commandments. I am a Christian, you have the New Testament as a guidebook, and so forth and so forth. I am a Muslim, the Quran is a source of my my moral guideline. Utilitarianism, on the other hand, is where I am chasing for the greatest good for the greatest number of people. You have act-based utilitarianism, then you have rule-based utilitarianism. But if there is any takeaway from all these theories, is that the idea of absolutism is not possible. If anything, we can only strive for relativism. Now, what are examples of teleology in play or consequentialism in play? Now, when a person is seeking their own gain, let me just give an example of it in this way. We are intrinsically trying to be utility maximizers. We want to engage in self-pleasure and self-aggrandizement. And every decision that we make, we are making in our own self-interest. Altruism is not the goal here. Altruism, as it were, in other words, being selfless and thinking of other people, is not what we are pursuing. And here is where I say I'll treat myself properly before I can treat others. I'll have resources before I can help others, and so forth and so forth. It is all about self-interest, not consequences to anyone else, but to ourselves. Therefore, this would be the summary of the theories that we have, and we shall see further what we mean about this in class. So we go to the last thing for the day. Thank you.